Outside broadcast team go out and about. Tonight, the West Yorkshire Police Academy.
At the age of 18 and a half, these young men had just arrived at the police academy to try on for the first time the familiar blue uniform, truncheon and handcuffs. After just 3 months of training, they'll go out on the streets with the full authority of the law behind them. This is the story of the place where they make policemen. The West Yorkshire Police Academy, tucked away in a quiet corner of Wakefield, is where they begin the process of learning to be a lawman. The hostel and the classrooms are home to 300 students, ranging from the very newest recruit to chief constables catching up on the latest developments. It's also the place where half of Britain's detectives are trained, where police horses and their riders learn to cope with a hostile crowd.
You in there? You're surrounded by armed police officers. You cannot escape.
And the place where police marksmen learn to handle a gun.
Listen to what I'm saying, and no one will get hurt. Riot! Turn! By the left! Quick march! The brave will retire! Riot!
There's only so much you can teach a policeman. The classroom and the parade ground do not of themselves create an officer of the law. That takes experience. And these days, experience can be a costly commodity. Nobody ever threw bricks or petrol bombs at PC-49 or Dixon of Dock Green. In the last few years, the art of keeping the peace has changed out of all recognition. In an age of riots, terrorism, computers and ever-changing legislation, the young policeman now has more to learn than ever before.
Well, the technological revolution of the 70s and 80s in our society is reflected within the police profession, obviously. And there's a great deal of hardware and there's a great deal of technical know-how required now that was never required in my day when I was their age. And this has got to be twinned in to the function on the street to give them support and resource, and that's really what it's all about, is to make them more capable. But having said that, we mustn't lose sight of the main objective, which is the human factor, the relationship between the constable and other members of the community and their acceptability of him. And we mustn't allow the technological aspect to get between the PC and the guy on the street. It is there to help him. It is not there to dictate what he will and will not do.
Now, we've said already that the Academy trains half of Britain's detectives, as well as a lot from foreign forces too. That adds up to around 900 students a year. And in their training, a spot of realism really helps things along. This little group of trainee detectives here have just arrived at the scene of a rather nasty incident. Their job now is to work out how to cope.
Right, during the night, you've investigated a complaint of rape and have now satisfied yourselves that this complaint is genuine. You've decided this morning to bring the complainant down to the scene to assist you as much as possible. DC Cliff, I want you to be in charge of this inquiry. Here's your complainant. Again, here's the scene and a number of divisional detectives. Will you detail them accordingly in order to investigate this matter?
Well, first of all, I would like the task force contacting to do a fingertip search of the area. Secondly, I want a team of men on house-to-house inquiries. And thirdly, I would like a photographer at the scene. So, John, if you will detail the task force to make a fingertip search.
Yep.
Dick, please organise a house-to-house team. And Mick, will you contact the photographer? Bob, will you speak to the victim, see if you can find anything else which we don't know already, please?
Well, Al Finlay, you're head of detective training here and responsible for the courses. How's this one going?
Very well. The DI, who's in charge, is giving them the brief outline, and a member of the class is appointed to conduct the investigation.
Is it always like this, the training, or is there much in the classroom too?
Oh yes, the object of this is to supplement the classroom training on the pure theory and the law on the subject that's in discussion.
So how long does it take you to make a detective here?
That's a difficult one. They're here for 10 weeks, but you must bear in mind that the majority of these chaps have been in a detective department back in the parent force as an aide or already established as a detective.
So the real training's on the road, is it?
Indeed, yeah. This is where they get the basic grounding. The experience is in the field.
How important is the work of the fingertip searchers here?
Yes, well, in this particular force, we employ the task force to undertake this, and most other forces have a department that will specialise in it. From our point of view as an investigator, the search of an area is terribly important because, A, you do not know what is there, and unless you do a really thorough search, and thoroughness is important, you will not find clues that have been left behind.
But with all the evidence here, why do you bother doing door-to-door inquiries?
Well, that's another area that is must not be overlooked. People living in the vicinity of a crime, unless you actually approach them, very rarely will they come forward. And by going along and asking the correct questions, it's surprising what information you can glean.
From the police at Wakefield, there's my identity. I wonder if you could help us.
In a difficult case like this, it's a tricky job then for the detective. Does he have to be a tough man, or does he have to be a humane man?
Well, dealing with the complainant for a start, she's had rather a traumatic experience. One must also guard against a false complaint, which are not unknown. Therefore, the detective, first of all, has got to be very sympathetic and tender and caring whilst dealing with her. And it's only when you really analyse all the information that you've got that you're in a position to understand whether you're somewhere near the truth.
Sounds like a tricky job.
Very tricky.
Learning to be a detective. Well, the Academy, of course, doesn't just train West Yorkshire's policemen. They come from all over the country, and in fact, from all over the world, for a wide range of specialised courses. And year after year, the Academy here shows a consistent profit. Some of these plaques on the wall will give you an idea of the kind of forces which have paid to send their men here to study. A 6-week course in the art of fingerprinting, for example, will cost £600. This is Detective Sergeant Alan Roberts. He's one of the scene of crimes officers, and that's a job that involves knowing exactly how to lift a fingerprint from a car. Alan, what are you doing at the moment, in fact?
I've just developed the latent fingerprints which have been left behind by the intruder.
Now, how does that work, actually?
Well, in effect, what's happened, the fingerprints have been placed on the glass, and what I've done, I've developed with some aluminium powder.
This is in your magic box, of course.
It is.
This goes with you on every job, of course, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
Can we have a look at some of the other powders you've got in there?
Yes, there's a white powder there which we use for the darker backgrounds, and there's some black powder there which we use on the lighter coloured surfaces.
So you're well prepared, in fact, aren't you?
Yes.
Once you've isolated your fingerprints, though, you've got the job of preserving them somehow. So how do you do that?
Well, we preserve those by lifting the marks from the glass, and then we secure it onto an acetate sheet.
Right, let's see that happen, can we? That's just a kind of sticky tape, really, isn't it?
It is, yes. That's all it is. It's just slightly low tack.
That just lifts the powder off, does it?
And it, in fact, lifts the developed fingerprint powder off. All we have to do then is place that onto a sheet of acetate, which we've done. And in fact, the marks, they're secured.
And those fingerprints are preserved forever?
They are.
Once you've got that, what happens next? Are there certain peculiarities you'd look for in those, then?
Yes, there are. In fact, on this mark here, you'll notice that there's several different types of fingerprint there. They're all from the same person. But in fact, they give a detailed description of that person by the mere fact that he's got a whorl and 2 loops among the fingerprints.
Just show me some of the distinctive points on there, will you?
Well, if you see on that one, there's the centre of the core of the fingerprint is circular, and on that one there's a slight loop on it.
And they're all individual, of course, aren't they?
They are, yes.
So the owner of those fingerprints is a marked man, is he?
He is, yes.
Now, of course, both out in the field and in the classroom, the Academy is in the business of getting information over quickly and clearly. That's why, for the last 10 years, the Academy has had its own television studio. Now, for part of the time, it's used to teach senior officers how to improve their television image. But most of the time, the studio and its technicians are busy producing training programs, illustrating all the tricky points of law which a young policeman needs to know, like this one.
hand over the money. Hand over the money or I'll scar her face. Hand it over now.
It really doesn't matter who is put in fear. There, it was someone other than the person who was actually robbed.
Well, Maurice Smith has been in charge of the studio since it began. How important, Maurice, is television as a training aid for policemen?
Very important indeed.
How does it help, though?
It helps in putting over visually a variety of points of view which the instructors would like to be able to visually show.
So you can see a sort of real-life situation, can't you? Yeah. Let's have a look at one of those cassettes now, shall we? This was a fairly complicated one. It deals with the weighing of vehicles.
Comparison shows front axle, legal plate weight 1 ton, actual weight 1800 weights, whereas the rear axle legal plate weight is 2 tons 500 weights, the actual weight is 1 ton 1400 weights.
Now, how long did that program take to make, Maurice?
About 3 weeks.
And how long does it run for?
It runs for 15 minutes.
You must have quite a sizable library now, I guess.
We have a library of about 100 programs.
Covering what sort of subjects?
Covering a variety of subjects from public order, drugs, robbery, points of law, that type of subject.
Now, in all the years you've been here, you've made an awful lot of programs. Which one of those is your actual favourite one?
My favourite one is one on police dogs, a programme we made to assist the young constable in appreciating what service the police dogs can do for him.
We'll have a look, shall we?
It is always helpful to the dog handler if there is a definite point from where he can cast his dog to commence tracking. For example, the point where the criminal was last seen. Another important fact to remember is that it is not necessary for the dog to have a sniff of any article touched by a human being before he can follow his trail. However, if an article is found near the scene, leave it where it is because it could be a good starting point for the dog to search for the trail.
Now, there was a time when every message and incident that came into a police station had to be written down on a piece of paper by the duty officer. And a pretty laborious business it was too. Now, that's all changing. He simply types it out on one of these keyboards. And over in Bradford, the police command and control computer remembers every word. The new system of computerised police work is gradually being extended across West Yorkshire, and these officers are learning to use it. It's been called, perhaps unfairly, Big Brother, but it does work. If, for example, a solitary policeman reports that he's going in after burglars, it'll remind the duty officer after 5 minutes or so to check if he's all right. More than that, it'll tell him where the nearest reinforcements are and even how many similar break-ins there have been in the area recently. So, Graham, how widespread is the use of computers in the police these days?
Well, they're used extensively for different purposes by different police forces.
What about the big one, the Police National Computer? How does that work?
Well, every force is tapped into the Police National Computer, which gives them criminal information and the registered owners of vehicles used on the roads.
But this is the first time that West Yorkshire's had its own computer, isn't it?
Yes, it's the first time we've used one for command and control purposes.
Isn't there something slightly sinister in policemen using computers?
No, not really. The information that is on display is something we've always had before, either on paper or on charts.
What's on display here? Those numbers at the bottom of the screen?
Well, this is a resource display, and the operator, when he indicates he's accepted the log, will change to give him action options, and he can indicate who he's going to send to the incident.
So these are cars and patrolmen?
These are cars and these are foot officers, yes.
What happens if you change the screen then?
Well, the log is indicating now that it's been accepted, and the action options now appear, and the operator would select whichever he wanted to show what the next stage of action is.
It's an amazing development and quite a big change for policing too, isn't it?
It's quite a change, yes.
The technology of police work is advancing all the time. Nowadays, the computer is very matter-of-fact. But built into the training here are certain ground rules that don't change.
Well, obviously, one of the most important things to any police officer is to be able to deal with people, to be able to communicate with them, to be able to deal with their everyday problems. And really, that's what we try to do here. We try to take young people into this service, young people who are fit and able to deal with the people of West Yorkshire, and we try to get them to understand the problems of those people so that we can be as helpful as possible to our community.
Can you spot the makings of a good policeman that early on?
Well, we try to. Obviously, we want people to join the police force from all walks of life. We want some people, of course, that are academically bright, and we want some people who are perhaps going to be happy to be constables for most of their service. We want all sorts of people in the police service because we deal with all sorts of people.
But the basic training of a policeman is very short indeed, just 12 weeks before he goes out on the street. Does that worry you at all?
Well, you're talking about the training which is in the classroom, and the real training of a police officer is out there in the streets. It's the policeman at pavement level that's really learning his job. He's out there with the people, and that goes on for 30 years or more, really.
If you had more facilities, more time, more money, what more would you teach a young policeman?
Well, I believe that policing is all about people and understanding people, and I think that that is the area of police training that we need to pay a lot of attention to. We need to train our policemen to understand what people do and why they do what they do, so that we are more understanding and more able to deal with things when they go wrong.
But authority is more and more under challenge these days. Are you happy when you send young people out to face up against those kind of problems?
Well, authority is much more challenged now than when I was a young policeman. But I believe that this is healthy. I believe that it springs from the fact that people are better informed as to the powers of the police and better informed generally. And therefore it's natural that authority should be challenged. That makes the policeman's job perhaps more difficult, but then we are well paid for that, and we have to be responsible, and we have to react properly to the challenge to our authority.